You're listening to The Low and No Show, a podcast that tells the inspiring stories from brands and the founders. My name is Johnny Stevens, the founder of Better Without, the app that helps people discover low and no drinks. I'm sitting down with guests to hear their stories, learn about their products, and the lessons they've learned.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Low and No Show. I'm here today with Chris and Thomas from Ovant'ly. So they are a distilled spirit. So intrigued to understand their story, learn a bit more about them. So I won't do any more talking. Hello, Chris. Hello, Thomas.
Hey, Johnny.
Hi, Johnny. Thanks very much for having us, mate. Appreciate
That's
it.
quite all right. How are we doing?
Doing good. Growing our hair through lockdown.
I know we're doing well. I can't wait for the hairdressers to open again.
Yeah.
So talk to me a bit more about I guess how you guys met, and then how this whole thing has come about.
Yeah, why don't you go, Chris?
So I guess it's an interesting story because Tom and I have known each other for a very, very long time, and we have a common interest in wine. I've spent most of my career as a sommelier, and Tom is a very established collector and taster of wine. You can put drinker in there as well if you like, but a very good taster. And when I was working in London, I was at Alan Ducasse at the Dorchester, at the 3-star, and Tom used to come and visit me, and we would taste a lot of wine together, a lot of Burgundies and things like this. And the conversation actually started because at that time in London, we had a very, very strong focus on the entire guest experience, going from the reservations into the host, then into the dining room, from the restaurant manager, obviously the chef. Every single detail was really thought through, and it used to really, I guess, irritate me when someone would want to drink in the restaurants, a non-alcoholic drink, and we sort of didn't really provide the options that were considered enough. So I felt a little bit, I felt that there was certainly something to do within that space, to be confident to put something on the table at a 3-star level, and certainly with the same level of focus and detail and love and passion that every other element of the dining experience had. And so Tom and I were talking about this one day, and it sort of just snowballed from there. I guess, is that a fair assessment, Tom?
Yeah, I think that's right, Chris. And, we had those conversations around what for both of us was the more important part of drinking. Was obviously you have a drink because you enjoy the buzz you get from it. But I think for both of us, it was actually the ritual of coming together and the enjoyment of the shared experience, which was something that we were really trying to capture in situations where, whether for circumstance, for culture, or for personal choice reasons, it just didn't make sense to have a drink. And Chris and I met or spent a lot of time together when I was traveling to London for business, and you've got to be sharp the next day. And so, Chris would say, let's have a lunch on Sunday and a glass of wine or a bottle of Burgundy, which is fantastic. But then you have to stop. But you don't want the evening to stop. You don't want the afternoon to finish. You don't want lunch to be over. But then you don't want to fall back into something which doesn't continue the experience.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where we got to. And with Chris's background and with his real understanding and knowledge of what guests want, what people want, what these rituals look like, we started to think, well, how can we do this in a way that delivers all those fantastic experiences that can be done in any location, in any situation, which never takes a backward step, but just without this one ingredient.
Yeah.
And from there, the conversation grew. And I think that's exactly right, Chris. And it had a very long gestation period. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
It didn't happen overnight. But it was really a process from there of saying, if we were going to do something like this, what are the flavors that we're looking for?
Yeah.
What would it actually look like?
Mm.
So there was a really creative process there, which drew very much on Chris's background and his experiences, and saying, well, at certain types and times of the meal, what do you want?
Yeah.
With certain types and of dish, what's actually going to work? And really being very analytical about building up the flavor profiles that we would want to be able to meet the expectations of, you know, ourselves, obviously, in the first place, but then of other people who we want to share this with. And that was that's a really terrific, enjoyable experience to go through that and to really think about what it did, because we wanted to make sure that we had something which was going to really deliver on the flavor front, but also provide the basis for doing something different as well.
Yeah.
You know, we wanted to be able to say, you can take our products, you can take our amazing drinks, and then you can turn them into something which is even more spectacular. So you're not caught with saying, well, you can just drink this as an aperitif, you can just drink this main course, you can just drink this as digestive, however you want to do it. You can use this as a base to really match with any type of cuisine or any type of situation. And that was a really, really exciting process. And then, of course, we realized that despite the fact that we both really enjoyed the ritual and we had a really strong sense of what we wanted to achieve in the glass, we didn't really have the technical expertise to create that. So you have to understand your own limitations. So we teamed up with a very long-term friend of mine who's actually a winemaker. So I grew up in Perth and in Western Australia and down in Margaret River, and have always had a connection to people who grow and make wine. And so we spoke to Liz Reed, who's the sort of the third member of the trio, and very much the creative genius, and sort of said, well, this is what we're trying to achieve. How do we go about capturing that in the glass? And so then we went through a long period of experimentation with technique and experimentation with flavor and experimentation with botanicals. And that took, I guess well over a year of building up our knowledge, both of technique and flavor, and how things react to different techniques, to get to the point where we finally thought, we've got something that's hanging together now. This is actually quite exciting, because the first time you do it, it's like, this is never going to work. What are we doing here? Yeah. And then, we went through that process over, over a course of a year, and we got to the point where we thought, I think we can make this work. And then we said, right, well, how are we actually going to produce it? And from there, we went from our little tiny still to the big still that you can see behind us, and the production facility that we've built around us to bring this into the world and to bring it to everyone else to enjoy. And that's how we ended up in the start of 2021, amazingly enough.
Wow, that is amazing. And I think there's two bits there that I hear when you talk about your story. You've obviously got the massive amount of experience within the drinks industry and within wine and as you say, being a sommelier, and I guess that's a lot of pressure on you. You're not going to release something that actually isn't absolutely perfect, because you've spent years training and understanding fantastic wines, that actually the last thing you want to do is then go, actually, yeah, that will do.
But that's why it's taken so long for us to put something on the market, is because we were not happy to put something in front of people unless it was as perfect as we can get it. But that process that Tom has talked about was really interesting, because there was no sort of predetermined way in how we were supposed to do this. We just did it based on our experience, which is in the wine world. So when we were when the distillations were sort of coming to life, we were saying, okay, we'll take a bit of this and a little bit of this, and if we change the ratio, how does it look? And then we taste. So it was a very, very similar process to a lot of the blending exercises that perhaps happen in Bordeaux or Champagne, where we use a lot of where they use Vin Clair and do an assemblage. That's sort of how we did it, because that's what we knew. That was natural to us. But I don't think it's natural to the industry to do it that way. That's how we did it.
Yeah, I definitely. I think it's, you know, it's very interesting, the low and no industry and people who have come into it. You know, you've got a real variety of people, you know, some who have, you know, come from the alcohol world, and that's, you know, that's sort of one batch. You've got people who actually just have never been in the drinks industry at all, and just gone, let's give it a go. And I think, you know, obviously everyone has their place, but for me, one of the things that's really interesting about your story is that whole wealth of experience that you can bring. And, you know, I think it's then what you've done is you found a need for actually, you know, high end, you know, products. That's something that, as you say, food pairing and everything is such a big deal. And I often think, you know, hotels massively missing a trick with, you know, hotels and sort of Michelin star restaurants are massively missing a trick with, you know, getting really good quality products and, you know, pairing it with a non-alcoholic drink, because it doesn't matter. It's just so much about that flavor and that content. I mean, I talked previously on this podcast about, I went to Tom Kerridge's Hand and Flower restaurant, and he did the most incredible non-alcoholic cocktails. And that's actually more what I remember of that experience, because they put so much effort into it. And for me, you just taste those flavors, and you know that actually care and attention's gone into that. And yeah, I often have conversations that go, you know, you think of all these hotels, especially in London. I mean, you know, 5-star Hotel Central, yet you've got stuff like afternoon teas happening that is all focused around people having that glass of champagne, but yet there's so many people that maybe are there that don't want to drink, and what is there for them. And as I imagine you've drawn from your experience to go, actually wind back 2-3 years, there wasn't a lot. And actually I still think I imagine if you go, well, maybe not so much at the moment because they're not really open, but if you go to some of these hotels, there's still a little bit behind. And I'm intrigued to know, I guess, how does that high-end 5-star world adopt products like yours?
I think from my point of view, when you're standing at the side of a table in that environment, in a 5-star hotel, you need to be really giving all your love and passion to every explanation. If it's where the coffee comes from, where the chinaware is made, obviously the dish, the wine, the whole experience needs such a delivery of passion and love. And it's only just recently that there have been products that come onto the market which enable staff to give that amount of love to their explanation. And that's where we feel that our product stands really highly, is that we there's such a great story. And I know from experience being at the side of the table, it's not, if you put an orange juice or a Diet Coke in front of someone, how much love can you give that? But for us, there's a story to tell, and we want to get it in the hands of the great industry professionals around the world that can share our story.
No, absolutely. And Thomas, obviously you're in the distillery and I guess out in Australia. What sort of, I guess, what challenges, what that whole process of producing the drink, how has that been? And you've obviously talked about going from small scale up to now, you know, much bigger scale, your own distillery. Where do you think, I guess, what learns and lessons have come along the way?
Yeah, it's certainly been a huge number of little lessons which have cumulatively led to quite a deep appreciation of what we're trying to do.
Mm.
I think the biggest thing from our perspective is all of the differences that come from a process which doesn't involve alcohol in comparison to a process that does. And we have always been 100% clear that we don't want to have alcohol involved in any step of the process. So all the things that alcohol does in whether it's wine or spirits, from things like mouthfeel to addition of sugars or control of residual sugars, through simple things like product shelf life and product safety, we've had to rethink every step of that to make sure that we can deliver the quality of the product in the glass without compromising on the safety of what we're delivering, or without compromising on the real flavor that we're trying to get there. And I think, just to give you one very simple example of that, is ethanol boils at 67, 68 degrees. Water, as we all know, boils at 100. And that temperature difference of 32, 33 degrees makes an enormous difference on the extraction of your volatiles and your botanicals. So when we started and we said, oh, okay, this is the technique that's going to work best for us, which is to use vapor distillation, we started with the gin maker's handbook. Oh, well, it'll at 67 degrees, this is what will happen, and all that sort of stuff. And of course, none of that happened. Absolutely nothing happened that was supposed to happen. So it was like
left disappointed.
Yes, disappointed indeed. That's a very, very good way of explaining it. And then, of course, as you go through the process, every step of the way, there's huge amounts of learning that we've drawn on, particularly from winemaking, because we're based down here, and that's Christopher's background, that's Liz's background. But we've always had to constantly check ourselves. Okay, that works in the winemaking context. Is it going to work here? How do we really need to think this through? So even things like the assemblage process, which Chris talked about, which is fundamental to what we do, what we found is that if you distill your individual botanicals and then blend them, you get one result. But if you take the botanicals and you distill them together, exactly the same proportion of botanicals will produce entirely different flavors when distilled together and distilled apart. And of course, from a winemaking background, you'd say, well, we'll take our individual elements and we'll blend them together. That's the blender's art. And what we found was that wasn't giving us the results that we wanted. So we've adopted this alternative technique, which gives us a much greater intensity of flavor and creates this almost alchemical reaction. It's almost more perfume-like than alcohol-like through the process. So every step of the way, there's been an assumption that we've had to test and challenge, and some of them have worked, but a lot of them have just gone, well, no, absolutely not. That's not, or that didn't work the way we were expecting it to work. So there's been a hugely exciting learning experience for everyone who's been involved in it.
Absolutely. And obviously, being in Australia, you've got the joys of high temperatures, weather changes. How do you adapt to that? I mean, is that been a learning that actually you hadn't expected, or because of sort of wine, the background in winemaking, actually you were aware of that?
Well, yeah, I mean, you've always got to be careful whether you're distilling alcohol or you're making wine. Temperature is a hugely important part of that process. For us, the biggest learning has been the sensitivity of our process to temperature. So when we distill, I can't tell you my trade secrets, but I have a specific temperature that I believe derives the best extraction. And you go half a degree, like literally half a degree above that, you can taste the product changes.
Crazy, isn't it?
And if you go 0.2 of a degree below it, all the flavor drops out. But that was a process of trial and error, so this takes 8 hours to run. So for 3 months, I sat in front of the still for 8 hours every day, tasting the samples as they came out, because of course the temperature in the still changes across the course of the distillation process. So you actually start getting your original vapors at a lower temperature. So you're getting less extraction. So we had to understand that, which again is the same as distilling gin, but you've got to go through that process. There is no handbook that says, here is going to be the original liftoff, here's the profile you've got to do. So I've got, spreadsheets for hours and hours of distillations, which tracks extraction rates, which have got my flavor notes built into them. It's like, right, so this is how we've got to do it. This is when the profile ticks off. This is how we get the best extraction. So, we do say, and I think it's true to say, that we relied on our background and our heritage and the cumulative knowledge you get from being in a winemaking region. But like I said, every day is a new challenge. Every day is a new assumption being tested. Every day is that wasn't supposed to happen. So that's been fantastic. But I think the thing that comes out of that, of course, is that, as Christopher said at the very start, what we've created is something which is, it's not unique because people will replicate it, but certainly in the context of the overarching approach to producing a sophisticated adult drink has never really been done before. And because we were constantly challenging these assumptions, and we were constantly saying, well, if we do it that way, what happens? If we do it that way, what happens? We really came up with something which sort of pushed a lot of things aside. And at the end of the day, that's what we were trying to do. And I just want to build on something that Chris said, because I think it's a really good point. Is our entire thesis behind this, the philosophy that we bring to this, is we want to push the category forward. What's happening in the no-low space is so exciting, and it's so dynamic. From when we started looking at this commercially, as opposed to just, why don't we have a look today, which I guess is 18 months ago, I'd say the number of distillates and spirit substitutes and alternatives on the market has doubled easily. But what we've always been very keen on and very clear on doing is saying, let's approach this in a way that actually pushes things forward, so that we create not only a drink that in our view stands on its own, but also can act as a canvas for doing really exciting different things, so that we take something that may have been pigeonholed potentially into, this is the non-alcoholic gin or the the non-alcoholic beer, and there's one or two of them on a menu, to something which can actually form a backbone and can be used by amazing creative people, more creative people than us, in terms of mixology, in terms of wine pair, in terms of food pairing, to create something which really hasn't been done before. And that for us is really exciting. It's that underlying drive to get the flavors right, which then allows you to do things which we haven't even thought of yet. And that's for us, that's really the grail. If people come to us and say, have you tried doing that? And we go, no, that's awesome. That tastes amazing. That's exactly what we want to try and achieve.
And mixologists are so important, and also just allowing them to be creative. There's no point in giving them, this is exactly what to do with it, because actually they will taste it, come up with those, those things that actually you hadn't even thought about. And it is so important.
That's right. And because we're not a substitute for a gin or rum or vodka, when we give products to bartenders, then they totally have an absolute blank canvas. And as Tom said, we're really surprised when we see some of the things that are being created, because there's no predetermined recipes. There's no we should use this like how we use a gin. They have carte blanche, and the results are pretty crazy here.
And so moving on to that, in terms of you've got 3 products. What are the different products? What are the different flavor profiles? I don't know who best to go with that one.
Oh, the boss.
No. You go. Well, I think A, boss is a bit of a stretch, but B, you go with the sommelier who knows what he's talking about.
So I guess we have a family of 3. If I can retrench my old skills here. Voila. We have a family of 3. Grace, which is our white distillation based on juniper berry. So there is a familiarity of flavor profile that you can find in gin. There's a really interesting fresh ginger characteristic. It's something that we worked really hard on as well, was to write recipes and also tasting notes of the product, and that was a really interesting experience to go through. And I think part of that experience was when we were tasting to try and get the balance of the flavors right. So we had a juniper base, but we also wanted some influence from other flavor profile, and we have some really fresh ginger characteristics showing through in this. So it's very vibrant, very fragrant, very, very expressive. Our perfect serve for Grace is tonic and lime, and it's fresh, clean, really pure. I think it's probably my favorite, if I can say that. Am I allowed to say that, Tom?
Oh, yeah, you're entitled to your opinion.
You know, have your favorite child. It's
I think it's probably my favorite.
What I really like about it is that, as Chris says, it has a familiarity, but it also has an accessibility. And one of the things that we strive for in all of the distillations is what Chris describes as crystalline flavors. So we like anyone who sits down with our distillations to be able to smell them and go, I can see here the juniper, I can smell here the ginger, I can smell here the cardamom. And it's that those crystalline flavors in the Grace, which I think just work so well. There's a femininity to it, there's a softness to it, but there's also an earthy spice to it, which makes, but because it is so clear, it just makes it so accessible for people. They can immediately say, I get this, I know how to use it. And then when you put it in the perfect serve, it's just fantastic.
Amazing.
And I should touch on this quickly as well, as part of the process. When we were going through the development phase and on the still, we would have X amount of botanical, and we would taste and think, okay, so we like this, but perhaps we want to see more of this, and we don't quite like this. So then we would alter very, very slightly the ratio of botanicals, and we get a different product. So we taste again, okay, this is great, but this is not great. We need to work on it. And it was a really long process to get this in the bottle where the harmony is where we want it to be. I mean, all the ingredients are interlinked, they're intertwined, and it's a harmonious experience. So that was many phone calls, screaming, crying, but we got there in the end. Yeah. But I think Grace is my favorite. We have this little guy called Verve. So I think this would be more our sort of aperitif style. Interestingly, Verve, we have some really fantastic feedback from the industry. It's not something which has that familiarity like Grace does. This is quite unique, based on some local ingredients, very herbaceous. It's quite surprising, actually. It's very, very intense, but it still has that fresh, clean purity on the palate. But we wanted to have something that has that more of a herbal touch. We find that in the perfect serve, which is soda and lemon, those flavors are really retained. They're very uplifted, but it also gives a really interesting dimension to cocktails, both low, no, and alcoholic cocktails, because of that really distinct herbal freshness. What do you think, Tom? That pretty accurate?
Oh, no, 100%. And the thing that I find when I try Verve with people most is that of all the distillations, the flavors in Verve are retained for longer. So sometimes you because with Grace, as we said, there's an easy familiarity about it. You sort of know what you're getting into. It's different for sure. It's not, no one would ever say it's exactly what you're expecting, but you sort of go, oh no, I think most people will go, yeah, I've got that. I got that. Verve is quite different. It's like, whoa, whoa, where did that come from? But in a positive way, in the same way when you taste something that's fantastic for the first time, you go, whoa, what was that? But the thing that I really like about it, I did a tasting last Friday before. And we sat out in the sunshine on Margaret River down the vineyard. It was a fantastic afternoon. And the response was the same. Everyone goes, oh, the grace was really easy. I really like that. Oh, and the royal, when you did the perfect serve, I could just get that. And there's the spiciness, it's all good. But everyone said as we left, the one I can remember, the one that I can still taste is the verve. So it's got this lingering impact on the taste buds, which is really, really interesting, really, really nice, and subtly powerful. It was probably the hardest to get right. It took a lot of monkeying around. When Chris said there were tears, verve caused the tears. but we got there and we're really happy with it.
Amazing.
I think that's why the industry has really gravitated towards verve, is because it's not something that's familiar. And I guess the industry, they like to find new things and unearth new things to be the first to share with the guests. So verve, I guess, ticks that box for the industry. And then we've got Royal, which is our dark distillation based on elderberries. I think this was, for me, really surprising. I found that we've done a lot of competitive tasting, and something that we were really conscious of was mouthfeel and depth of flavor. Royal, our dark distillation, we were really pedantic about making sure that we had that texture. And so this neat, just with a little orange wedge, is absolutely beautiful over ice, because there is that depth, that feel, that mouthfeel, that texture. What's also interesting is that depth of flavor changes. So the flavor profile changes throughout that sort of that weight. You can taste little nuances of different flavor profile. Really textural, really luscious. Yeah, really, really beautiful. I think that's my favorite, actually. Can I change, Tom?
Well, I think it's difficult, as Johnny said, you don't want to choose your favorite child. They've all got their unique characteristics. I'm not talking about you, my babies. But the Royal is, I'd agree with you, Chris. It's the most, Grace is quite familiar. Verve is new and exciting, but the Royal is the one that has the greatest depth and complexity in a lot of ways. And it's the one that takes its longest to reveal its secrets. I mean, that makes it sound more mysterious, but it really does change over the course of the palate. So what you taste on the front of the palate is very different to what you taste at the end. It's very different to the lingering taste that you get. And you can, exactly as Chris says, you can drink it neat or with just a very simple wedge of orange and just get the most amazing flavors coming through. You get this aged honey sweetness, which is just absolutely phenomenal. I just completely love it. And my epiphany moment with it was because it's not normal. It's not something you would go, oh, that's immediately an X. So you do have to, it's an intellectual drink. You do have to think about it. But that's what we try to do. We're trying to push things, trying to be challenging. And so my epiphany was when I made an old fashioned with it. And just that 3 splashes of bitter and the really good sugar, the Rapadura sugar in there. And all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, this is just incredible. It was just an absolutely fantastic drink. And that's really what we're aiming for with all of these distillations, is for people to have that epiphany moment and go, oh, I can see how this works. Oh my gosh. And the doors open up and all of a sudden you're like Christopher and you've just invented 70 cocktails. So, that's what we're really aiming for. And that's why, for me, you don't have a favorite, but I think Royal is the one that, over time, you sort of keep coming back to in different ways and thinking about it in different use cases, different opportunities, different ways. How could I use this? Because a lot of people go, oh, well, it's got these really intense anise pastis flavors. So I did a tasting as we were finalizing the recipe, it'd be 8 or 9 months ago now. And this particular person was tasting it, said, oh, this is just like drinking a pastis. And I was, that wasn't at all what we were aiming for, but I totally get that. That's exactly, that's a beautiful way of thinking about it. So then you say, all right, well, I drink it like a digestive. And then I was playing around with it when Chris was in Thailand and we were talking about Thai food. And I said, well, what about a bit of lemongrass and a little bit of lime and a little bit of Thai basil? And all of a sudden you've got something, and a bit of ginger. All of a sudden you've got something which is just amazing to eat with spicy food. And that's a completely different proposition to someone who was telling you to be treated as a digestive. Yeah. And then in the intervening period, I'd had my little moment with the old fashioned, and I was like, wow, there's some versatility here. And it's that complexity that we really like about it and we get really excited about.
And I think just to touch on that as well, the reason that we are able to have such versatility with our distillations is because the flavor is so pure and carries so well in mixed drinks, in cocktails, and in the perfect serve. The flavors are really there's a real depth of flavor. So we are able to have so many different combinations when mixing drinks, and so many different experiences.
It's amazing, and I think it's that whole education and I suppose allowing the guests to try it, and also, as you said, you go and try it with different foods. I mean, it completely can change the drink. I mean, and that's very much as well. If you look at the beer world, you try non-alcoholic beer and you have it with, say, spicy food, and then another time you have it with it is completely different. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how hotels, top-end restaurants adopt that to go, really recommend those drinks that with the dish pairing. I think dish pairing is so important, and actually guiding the guest into, actually, that's, if you like these type of flavors, actually this is going to work, or this, having this product in this type of way is going to, give you what you want. And I just think it's where we've, it's been, I say easy in the alcohol world, but there's so much choice, and where now it's really having to go, actually, how can we cater for people that actually, for whatever reason, as you say, it may be they're not drinking, or it could be that, and I think something that's happening more and more is that actually people are adding in non-alcoholic spirits to an alcoholic spirit, just create a weaker cocktail. Actually, you can, if you can get the great flavors, and if people are drinking because they want those flavors, then actually does it matter whether it's got alcohol in or it hasn't.
Look, and that point is exactly where we're coming from. The driver for us is always going to be, what's the experience? Have you had an awesome cocktail? And, Chris and I both still drink. I drink a lot less than I used to, but I still enjoy a really good glass of wine. I still enjoy a really good craft beer, but I do it on an irregular basis when something really interesting pops up. And I want to be able to replicate that level of interest. I want to be able to have that level of excitement from something which, from whatever drink I have, no matter what it is. So whether it's an alcoholic drink or a non-alcoholic drink, I always want to be excited by what I'm drinking. I want the ritual experience to be the same, no matter what's in the glass. And that's really where we were coming from in designing these. So if you look at the cocktails that we've put on the website, which, Chris has spent a year developing, about a quarter of them, or more than a quarter of them, have alcohol in them, because we said there is a great way to create an amazing cocktail here, which involves a bit of alcohol. Because there's an additional flavor there, which gets you to a really interesting point. And then from the consumer's perspective, you go, well, that's fantastic. I've got a half strength. Or I'm going to start the night with something alcoholic because I really enjoy that and I can do that responsibly. But then I want to move on to something else, which is, non-alcoholic after that. And, we can cater for that entire spectrum. And that's really what we think is an interesting part of this development, is just to change the thinking around, oh, this is alcoholic, this is non-alcoholic. No, that's not the point. These are amazing drinks. And you should enjoy them because it allows you to share an experience with people, and because the flavors are fantastic. And that for us, I think, is one of the really exciting and scary things of the task we've set ourselves. I think the guys who make non-alcoholic beer, and I drink a lot of non-alcoholic beer because it's so good now.
It is. And
I enjoy the flavor, but I've got to be up here in the shed 6:30 every morning. I'm here 12 hours a day, and I can't go out and drink four pints at night and do that, but I really enjoy a beer when I get home. But you don't have to educate someone about when they have a beer. Like, a beer is beer. It comes in a glass, it comes out of a tap, or it comes in a can, and away you go. And if you're making something which is a gin without alcohol, well, okay, so I'll just put some tonic in that. But that sort of restricts the category. And that doesn't get you to the point where it's all about the drink and the ritual and the experience. So the task that we've set ourselves is to say, this is about the drink. This is about doing something different and exciting and pushing away the boundaries and concentrating very much on the flavor. And what that allows you to do is come up with the most amazing, interesting, and exciting stuff. But the flip side is exactly the point that you've made, is we then have to be the educator. We have to work with the hotels. We have to work with the bars. We have to work with the restaurants and say, this is the way you can serve it. This is the way you can do it. And what we're finding, and Chris, call me out if I'm wrong here, is that there's always some skepticism. Oh, there's no booze. What's the point? But once you start to explain to people what this is and how you can use it, people become so enthusiastic. They go, oh, I get that. Right. Oh, well, that would work for the 20% of the people who are in here who don't want to drink. And I feel terrible because I can't give them the same level of experience, which was exactly where we started with Chris.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And we've provided something that otherwise wouldn't exist, which is really exciting. And then you say, well, let's not restrict ourselves to the 20% of people who are coming in and not drinking. Let's think about the 80% of people who go out. And if you ask them, if you survey them, 80% of people who go to the pub don't go to the pub because they want to get drunk. They're going to the pub because it's the social thing to do. So let's think about how we can approach these people and say, here is an awesome drink. Don't worry about whether it's got booze or not. It just tastes fantastic. And that for us is really the North Star, is, if we can get to the point where someone goes to the bar and says, I would like an Ovant and dry, and no one even bats an eyelid because that's just an amazing drink that you'd be having, or I'd like an Ovant old fashioned, then for us, that's game over. That's just exactly where we want to be, because we've delivered a product which people think of on exactly the same terms, and there's no longer any distinction, but it allows you to make that choice without any concerns or any guilt. That's sort of where we're at, really, isn't it, Chris?
Yeah, I think so. And if I look at it from my personal point of view, if I had a really long week, lots of hard services, on a Wednesday night, I don't want to come home and mix myself a double gin and tonic, but I want to take care of myself. So I want to have 5 minutes to myself. I want to go through the experience, and I want to treat myself with a product that I can gravitate towards, because there is so much love and passion and such a great story. So from a personal perspective, I think that we offer that experience. You can really go through that ritual and really treat yourself, and as Tom said, without any associated guilt.
Yeah, absolutely. And that treating yourself is so important. It's that psychological part of relaxing and enjoying it. And I'm intrigued in terms of, we'll come on to obviously the product in launching in the UK, but in Australia, how has it been adopted? How Low and No in Australia, from this side of where we are, looks like it's accelerating. It's really gaining traction.
Yeah, that's right. So it's interesting, even since we started looking at this category sort of commercially, as opposed to just thinking about it. You've seen the category in Australia really explode. So it's if you go into most high-end restaurants now, you'll always have some form of non-alcoholic choice on the restaurant. So I'm in Margaret River, and this is a wine town, and a craft beer town, but we're in the main pub on the main street now, and well, in fact, both of them. And I was in there speaking to the owners of the Settlers on the weekend, and they said, this is fantastic for us, because there's always a driver. There's always someone who doesn't want that. And we can now offer them something which is on a par with everything else that we serve. We serve the best wines from around the region, the best craft beers, and now we can offer them the same thing. So what we're seeing is exactly what I think you're seeing in the UK, from what I can see, is a growing appreciation of not only the availability of the product, but also the variety that comes along, and a willingness to experiment, and a willingness to think more about incorporating this into the standard offering at any restaurant or at any bar. And if you look at the statistics, I think it's the non-alcohol space is about 3 and a bit % of the Australian market, which is actually slightly ahead of the UK. It's just markets are much bigger. But the non-alcoholic beer segment is growing really, really strongly, and the spirits are coming along well behind that, which is great. And there's a lot of creativity down here. There's a lot of new brands launching, and you now go into basically any bottle shop, even the really big chain bottle shops, and they will always have a non-alcoholic section.
It's amazing, and I think it's it just shows how far things have come. And as you say, especially the driver point, actually the driver's going to be the one that picks these places, because actually most pubs and everything, you're going to be able to get a branded beer or anything. So for anyone who's drinking, it doesn't really matter. They're most of the time going to be able to get what they want. It's that driver that, as you say, if you can cater for them, we can't sit there and drink gallons of Coke or actually, I don't really drink it much, but I go into a pub when they were open, and it's like £4 for a pint of Coke, and you're like, but that is literally syrup and soda water, and you just think it just, where at least here you're getting a quality product, and actually people are willing to pay for it. So I think that for me is a big thing, for hospitality, and when it opens up again in the UK, is that appreciation that actually, just because it doesn't have alcohol, it doesn't mean you have to suddenly slash your prices. People are willing to pay, and willing to pay for a quality product.
And that point that you've made, Johnny, is exactly the core underpinning of what we're trying to do. It's, get away from this distinction of, it's alcohol, it's non-alcohol. It's what experience does this provide me as someone who's gone out? What experience do I get from being able to enjoy drinking this product? And it should be that the alcohol is not the driving choice on this. It should be that this is a fantastic product which delivers an amazing experience, which allows me to go out with my mates, or allows me to go out for dinner and have a fantastic time. And it's to really shift that mindset away from the fact that if I go out, the only thing I can have is alcohol. And that's really what we're trying to achieve here. And that's why we've been so focused, as Chris said, on not trying to mimic the alcohol experience, but trying to create something which is new and allows people to do things which are different, because you pay for novelty. Like, I'm excited to try something new. I often say this only half jokingly, but if you'd never drunk gin before and someone gave it to you the first time, it's spitting out like poison, right? So why would I want to replicate something which is actually a fairly unpleasant experience? And that's, again, what we were really focused on doing, is creating something which is going to be really enjoyable and really great fun for people.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because about the sort of, would you enjoy it? Because I stopped drinking, but when I did drink, I used to love Guinness, but I didn't like a lot of stouts because they were just too strong. But it's really interesting now that you try a non-alcoholic stout, because you haven't got that alcohol in there. Actually, you don't have, the sharp taste that that I used to hate. You get that real smoothness, and I think it's, it'd be really interesting to see whether people do start to adopt, if there's a draft beer in the pub, will they just go, actually I like that beer, so it doesn't matter, it's just, and that's what I'm going to drink. And I'm fascinated to see around the world what happens, because I think, as you say, the UK is ahead in many ways, but actually because hospitality is being closed and everything, it's sort of behind in that perspective. And for your product, obviously we're recording this episode, it's going out on the 26th, and so your launch, I believe, is either this day that we're releasing the episode or very close. Is that right? Depends where the boat is with the product. Yeah.
That's right. If I say the date, then I'll no doubt jinx myself, but very close to that date. Yes. Yeah. So go to www.ovant.com and you'll see the exact date. But certainly the container is on its way. So we're really, really excited to test the market and let people in the UK try the product. We've had some terrific feedback from the samples that we've sent back already, and we've got great people on social media who are giving us a lot of support. So we're really hopeful that that'll continue once we can get the product into your hands.
Amazing. And we'll keep spreading the word our side, and as I say, we'll get this interview will go out, or this episode, and we'll try and spread the word and go and try the product when we can.
Yeah, well, as soon as we can get it to you, you'll be into it, and I think you'll be really excited by it and really impressed. And you'll see, it's a little bit strange. You haven't had the chance to try the product, so you can hear us going on about this stuff and pushing it forward, and you sort of go, "Yeah, you just got 3 bottles of water there." So I'm really excited for you to be able to try it and see what we're talking about and why we get so excited and passionate about it.
Amazing. And then when I can get over to Australia to come and see you, I will, when they let us in.
Yeah, well, it's what I love is to be able to bring people who are interested in this space to see what we actually do, and to walk them through the process and to really give them an understanding of how much care and attention and how handmade and bespoke this is. Because from our perspective, as Chris said at the very outset, we wanted to do something which we controlled every single aspect of. So there was never any questions around quality. So there was never any lapse in flavor. There was never any degradation of intensity. We wanted to have it all under our control. And, that brings risks with it, because if it goes wrong, it's on me. But by the same token, it's so exciting when I can bring someone into the distillery and say, so this is where we do each of the steps. And I go, oh my gosh, really? Wow, that's fantastic. So as soon as you can get down here, please.
I will do. Well, you mentioned it earlier, but again, where do people find you? The website again, and we'll put it in the bio as well.
Yep. So the easiest way, certainly initially, is on our website. So www.ovant.com, and deliver anywhere in the UK, usually within a day or two.
Amazing. That sounds good. Well, Chris, Thomas, thank you very much for joining me, and we will look forward to trying the products and speak soon.
Thanks for your time, Johnny.
Brilliant. Cheers. Thank you.